Hello everyone, and welcome to a thing, I guess, that might be a thing. This is Digi bro, and I have with me Idylia. Say hello.
Hello, I'm Idylia.
Yeah, he writes pony fanfictions and stuff, but right now we're talking about Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Something I still can't pronounce properly.
Yeah. Well, technically it would be, the Japanese name would be Shinseiki Evangelion. So you can really pronounce it however you want. You just watched this for the first time recently, right?
Yeah, I just watched it over the last 2 weeks or so with a friend of mine.
So to give at least a little bit of context to what this is, which I think most anime fans are aware of Evangelion, but for those who aren't, it aired in the mid to late 90s, is a cultural phenomenon, one of the best known and, more importantly than being well known, very culturally significant anime series. It's often credited with bringing about the age of moe in some circles. It definitely brought about the age of character products and character-focused marketing in Japan. So, yeah, pretty big deal for anime. Very psychologically deep series. Lots of people have analyzed it, and yet, if you actually go looking for Neon Genesis Evangelion analysis, you won't find as much of it as you hope for, and the series is very open to interpretation. The series creator, Hideaki Anno, likes for people to choose their own interpretations. He tries to claim that he has no ideas about the show whatsoever. He's like, I just made shit up. It's up to you guys to come up with meaning. So, yeah, that's what we're here to do, I guess.
That's such an interesting way of like going about creation. Just being somebody who does things and thinks about ideas. I can't honestly imagine sitting down and being like, well, I have an idea for a story, but I don't know what it means at all. I don't know what I'm trying to do with it. There's no themes here. I just want to, present events.
I'm certain there were, but at the same time, I've gotten the impression from Hideaki Anno that he changes his mind a lot. Like, that's the kind of character I sort of get from him, is that he'll go back on things he's said before. He'll change his mind. He'll say at one point that something is meaningless and another point that it's not. And I think what it really comes down to is that Evangelion is such like a big pool of ideas. It has lots of themes, but they're not really central, you know? There's just lots of shit in it. I feel like it pays homage to so much stuff, and it just is like, it's kind of a clusterfuck, which most anime is. There's not a lot of anime that's really focused on like a central theme, the way a lot of like American or Western movies or customary storytelling would be. There's definitely a difference in the way that Eastern storytelling structures itself as opposed to Western, I would say. There's a lot less focus on being tight and like together and like, beginning, middle, end and character arc development. It's more like there's a lot of stuff and it's all just kind of there, and it happens to have interesting character arcs or things like that, but for the most part, it's a lot more of a melting pot sort of approach. Yeah, what did you think of Evangelion watching it for the first time?
For the first time, I kind of thought, at first it was, I was like entirely consumed with the frustration of Shinji's character for like the first 6 or 7 episodes, because I had like certain impressions about what I don't know how to pronounce it, Evangelion was.
Mm-hmm.
So I came into it kind of being like, well, all we really know up until like episode 6 is that Shinji is the main character, and you have the supporting characters of Kusuragi and Ritsuko and his father, but you don't really ever get a heavy feeling that he's actually forming any meaningful connections with these characters, except for Kutsuragi after a while, or Katsuragi rather. So I was just kind of like, I don't know whether this is supposed to be a cool show about robots fighting cool things that are trying to destroy the world, or if it's trying to be this like existential introspection to this character that I can't really entirely relate to at this point. But I think after a while I sort of picked up on the dynamic that they were going for, because it is a totally different dynamic than anything else I had really watched before. And so I picked up on that like odd tonal unnerving dynamic, and I started to dig into it. And once you started to see a little bit of character progression, I started liking it a lot more. Until I got really, really invested in each of the characters, and I felt like even with Rei, I felt like I knew who they were supposed to be as characters to some degree, and that's when I really started like really enjoying it as a series.
So do you think going back through it, you'll enjoy it more, like retrospectively knowing about the characters, like where they're coming from?
I think so, especially so recently, because I think especially all those like moments with Shinji in the very early episodes where it's just like those long blank cuts with him sitting there thinking about stuff or being, rejecting like all this importance that's being bestowed upon him by other characters. I think that's going to have a lot more context and meaning this time around.
Yeah. It's interesting to note that Shinji himself is probably the most divisive element of the show. He's had a famous backlash the entire time that the show's been around, especially in the West, where people make fun of him for he doesn't pilot the robot, There's this classic comic that used to float around the internet where it was like the badass manly Shinji, and he like shows up and he immediately is like, fuck yeah, giant robot, I'm a pilot that shit. And then he also like just immediately like gets with all the women in the cast like in that room. He's like, oh, Rei, hell yeah, like gets on her, gets Misato, and like it's just this, super manly version of him, which is the exact opposite of the entire point of Shinji, which is that he's a completely reclusive, introspective, can't deal with people kind of character. It's interesting because for me, I actually watched Evangelion when I was 14. Mind you, Shinji is 14.
Yeah.
And at the time that I watched it, I was 14 and I felt exactly like Shinji did. I completely related to him because I had no friends. I didn't talk to anyone. I never made any connections with people. I had just gone through like major depression, had been to a school where I didn't know anyone the whole time I was there. So like I completely got Shinji immediately and was just like in his shoes. And so all of it hit me super hard. Like the whole show was just like uber resonant with me. And it's interesting to note that a lot of it really comes down to like how people see Shinji is really a lot of how well they can relate to him. And I realized that rewatching episode 1, they don't explain much like outright. It's very show don't tell in terms of characterization in that episode. Like you never hear, oh, Shinji doesn't really talk to people. The most you get is Misato saying, oh yeah, he's got the same cold nature as his father, like...
Yeah, seeing that the second time around, I was like, ooh, really? She said that?
She caught it, like, immediately,
I know.
So, just because he just kind of... And there's this great theme that's set up in episode 1 that's one of those that'll completely go over your head if you don't know to look for it, is that he talks about maturity with her. Where he accuses me, it seems like just innocuous dialogue where he accuses her of, or she says, I expected you to be cuter, and he's like, I expected you to be more mature. And that sort of commentary on maturity, not just in Evangelion, I feel like it runs through like all of Gainax's shows, the studio that makes it, because if you ever seen FLCL was directed by the guy who's the understudy of Hideaki Anno, the director of Evangelion, and FLCL's the entire plot is about that, like just like that conversation could be stretched out to the entire storyline of FLCL, where it's about the main character sees he expects adulthood to mean maturity, and he doesn't know how to like liven up and embrace his own childishness or like recognize his own childishness. And Shinji kind of has elements of that where he seems to know that he's a kid, that he's young, but he kind of expects adults to be more mature to make the decisions for him, Yeah. And I think that's part of why he's so upset when he gets to the NERV headquarters, because I feel like Shinji thinks the adults of the world owe him something, And I don't know if that's made evident through episode 1, but there's definitely this sense of he came there because he thought his father owed him something, and he did not get what he came for. He thought his dad was going to maybe apologize or something, or maybe try to reconcile, or maybe they were just going to talk for once, and instead his dad's like, yeah, you got to pilot this fucking robot,
Yeah. Really? Because, like, I mean, I can totally get where you're coming from with like that he feels like he owes them something, but
Right.
it's more. I always thought that he just like didn't. He was like just a natural follower, and he didn't like making the decisions himself.
Yeah, that too, definitely. Because he does start following, like, he basically follows along with the other characters in the show as well, when it comes to, like, Asuka and Rei. But, there's definitely, I felt like, rewatching this episode, there was enough hints that I feel like you have to be somewhat inattentive to just completely think that Shinji's a pussy bitch for not piloting the robot. But I understand viewing it inattentively, because when they're in the car, going down into Nerve headquarters, it shows the note that his father sent him, and it's literally like the words "come here" scribbled on a scrap piece of paper. Like, he had just crossed out everything, all the important information on it, wrote "come here" and sent it to Shinji, and that's his, like, it's like, this guy, his dad is a dick. He's clearly he's a complete dick. He stands above him in, like, this domineering position, you know, demanding that he come down. You know, in the dad himself clearly puts a blockade between himself and others. You know, even his glasses. You notice in the scene where they say, "Oh, the shockwave is coming," and then it knocks out the view from his glasses because they're like computer glasses, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's like he's not even really looking directly at the world. He's looking at it through like this computer visor. And when he talks to Shinji, he talks to him through a glass pane up on a fucking pedestal. You know, it's like. He's put so much space between himself and the people he deals with. Yeah, and so I guess Shinji kind of takes after his father, and of course Misato calls him out on it right there in episode 1, and you're like, well, damn.
Actually, that was the most interesting thing for me in this episode, because I remember watching it, I was frustrated that they mentioned Shinji's relationship with his father, and it seemed to be really tumultuous. Like, it was way more professional than any other thing I'd ever seen in anime before.
Right.
And I expected throughout the anime for like there to be some progress made on that, like anything whatsoever. And there was that one scene with him and his father at the mom's graveyard, which basically just like cemented in with me, this is not going to go anywhere.
Right.
And so rewatching this episode, like, I kind of got the feeling that, if you think about it, Shinji, like, acts a lot from his emotions in this episode. That's the way that I see it, anyways.
He's very, like, aloof and just sort of goes with the flow, yeah.
Yeah, and, like, even his dad knows to use Rei, like, to bring the wounded Rei in there to get him in the robot. And his dad is just up there, like, being completely cold and professional and unemotionless. And he's having this, like, breakdown, like, why are you doing this to me?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's almost a perfect way to introduce this relationship, because, I don't know, it just never goes anywhere.
Yeah, like, every time, because I've seen this episode a number of times, because I've tried to rewatch Evangelion a bunch, and I typically will, like, watch episode 1 and then never remember to finish it. But it bothers me just thinking about how quick people are to say, oh, I would have jumped right in that robot. How dare Shinji be this pussy about it? And every time I rewatch the episode, I'm like, you wouldn't. You really wouldn't. Like, if you were Shinji, he's 14, he's in from the countryside, has no idea what the fuck's going on. Everything he sees in the city is, like, completely new to him. You know, he's never even been to the underground geofront. He's, like, he's shown a giant robot he's never seen before, and he's like, oh, you have to go save the world. You'd be like, fuck, what? You know, like, what are you telling me right now? Like, no. I could not see myself jumping into that robot seat all willy-nilly thinking I was gonna save the world, you know, like, I'd be shitting bricks. The minute that N2 mine went off, I'd be shitting bricks.
Yeah.
And people are always like, oh, he should be piloting it. And I think the issue there is just that too many people come to anime for wish fulfillment, or like, what's the other word for that? Being, like, experiencing it, vicarious...
Immersion, maybe?
Yeah, immersion, stuff, something like that. People want to see on screen what they want to experience themselves. And Evangelion is not a show that's meant to say, oh, if you have a fantasy about piloting giant robots, this show is for you. It's not that. It's not escapist. That's the word I'm looking for.
Right.
It's not an escapist work, and people come to it like, oh, giant robot shows are all about, I like to see giant robots fighting, and it's like, that's not what this one's about. Not really. It's about psychosis, really. And another thing I want to touch on, I love the pacing of this episode, because it's like half of it is this like giant monster movie / military, like intense, strict thriller, and the other half is just like this aloof wandering of Shinji Ikari. Like, whenever it shows the military people, they're like screaming technical words at each other. The guy like breaks a pencil because he's so pissed. They nuke this creature, and it's always like showing it, and it's like dun dun dun, you know, like shooting missiles at it and shit. And then it'll show Shinji, and he's like standing in front of a payphone, you know, and like him and Misato are just like, they're driving. They don't do anything exciting in this episode. That's really what's noteworthy about it. Like, their car gets knocked over by the action that's happening over there, and then they push the car back on its hood. But it's not like they're, you know, fucking serpentining through debris that's falling down or some shit. They're not doing any kind of hero stuff. They're just there. And that really emphasizes the dichotomy between, like, what's going on, like, what this big military stuff that Shinji's being expected to do, and the actual exploration of him getting there. It's not exciting. He has not experienced anything that would get him into big, dumb action hero shoes. He's just kind of been aloofly wandering to the place.
And I think it's really interesting to point that out because, like, general narrative structure, if you're talking about, like, tension throughout a story, especially the first part of a story, you see, like, a roller coaster curve, almost. You want, like, spikes in tension followed by, like, lulls in tension to make the next spike more poignant.
Right.
And it's really weird because, actually, I didn't really notice that in this episode. And I don't think that's a testament to them doing it badly. In fact, I think that's a testament to them doing it goodly, because goodly is not a word, but because
doing it well.
Yeah,
You're supposed
exactly.
to be a writer, Idylia. Come on now.
I'm sorry.
No one's gonna let you edit their fanfic.
But I just mean by it's kind of like really well crafted, especially when you bring in that parallel between Shinji and, you know, the world of Nerve.
Yeah.
Because I think there are a lot of parallels to be drawn, because you immediately, when you're told that his dad is his dad, you expect there to be some connection there, when really, when they present it, there's absolutely, you know, like, no connection whatsoever.
Right.
There's no... Shinji is not anything to do with Nerve. He can't relate to Nerve whatsoever except through Katsuragi.
Yeah. I guess we should wrap this up because we do have to do like a few more episodes and we've already gone for 20 minutes, but just the last note I want to say is just rewatching this episode, the thing that always hits me first, and it's not like a big deal, but it always hits me, is just how well directed it is, because anime is not typically that well directed. Like, Evangelion feels cinematic. It feels like a movie. Like, there's shot composition and, like, and transitions between shots that you would not get out of any standard show. Hideaki Anno definitely has, like, big deal influences, like real movie influences. It's interesting because I've never seen all of 2001: A Space Odyssey, but I caught the last, like, 20 minutes of it once, and I went, oh my god, this is End of Evangelion. Like, the way that shots are composed and everything is just like Stanley Kubrick style, and I was like, wow, this shows that he's not just, you know, some director for hire anime guy like a lot of them are. He's definitely he's a legit director is what I'm getting at. He deserves to have his name known by people.
Yeah, alright. I think that's probably good then.
Okay, we just watched episode 2. What'd you think? Idylia?
I thought that, well, personally, I like that episode even more than the last one. It's because, like the structure of it was, like, really, really great to me. Just, like, as a writer, slightly, I guess. Because, like, not only, you know how they cut away from...
I like how you call yourself slightly a writer as if you don't write, like, more than the average person, like, exponentially.
Well, I write all the time. I literally write all the time, but... Okay.
I decree it.
Okay, great. I'm a writer now. So yeah, as a writer, it was really cool to see a structure like that, because not only did they pulled away that scene at the beginning where you find out what happens in the Eva fight, and not only does that do a lot for the pacing of the episode, because we get like a hit of tension right at the beginning, and then the lull throughout the rest of the episode, and we find out what happens again. So they save that tension and split it up into 2 parts, so they don't need to manufacture more tension for no reason. And it also sets up the episode immediately with intrigue. Like, there's a lot of stuff we don't know, and even after we see that part with the robot, it just asks us more questions.
Instead of starting off going, oh, we saw that cool action scene, now they're winding down, we spend the whole time going, what's that wound about? Why is there a hole in that building? Why are they putting the Eva's face back on? What happened?
Yeah. And I didn't really notice that at the beginning, the first time I watched this, but you know how they mention, that must be the Eva's true form, and Shinji looks at that eye in the mirror. I explicitly remember that, but I never got that was supposed to be foreshadowing. I never remembered that later when those questions finally started being answered.
I had completely forgotten that had happened early in the show as well. Yeah, the structure is interesting, definitely, for the reasons we just discussed, and also because it's worth noting that a friend of mine, my mentor and fellow anime blogger, Ghost Lightning, he talked about this episode in relation to Eureka 7, which have you ever seen Eureka 7 at all?
No.
Eureka 7 is an anime, another mecha anime, that has a lot of similarities to Evangelion, and blatantly pays tribute to it in a lot of ways. And the second episode of Eureka 7 actually copies the structure here. It does the same thing where it cuts away during the action scene, then comes back later to show you this big finisher. Though I think with Eva, part of it, it's not just about the saving the tension and everything, which is a great reason to do it, but it also creates a lot longer of a time that we're still thinking of the Eva as just a military robot. We have no reason to believe it's anything else. Because the first episode ends before we even see it move. It just kind of comes up, and it's this, before they shoot the Eva up the chute, it's this really rigid military sort of dialogue, I forgot to mention this because I kind of hate the last couple minutes of the first episode because it's just 2 minutes of them launching the Eva, which if you're not as, giant robot fans love that shit. They love the whole, setting in, initializing, all the technical babble and stuff, and all of that is very much in the mecha tradition. It's the kind of shit that Gainax does because they are fanboys. This studio is known for being the fanboy studio. They love to pay homage to older shows, so all of that shit is definitely in that vein. But you see the Eva come up, and it's just and then he starts piloting it at the start of the episode, and it's just a piece of shit. He's just getting railroaded, and so he gets his ass kicked, and then he looks like he's left for dead. And then it's so unexpected, because you don't know what happened, you don't know how he beat the angel, but it seems like he just got fucked up. So when you finally see the battle, and it's oh shit, the Eva actually went into this berserk mode and fucking destroyed that thing. And it's the total opposite of how any giant robot moves in any show. If there's one thing that I think Evangelion really almost pioneered, it was making the giant robots feel completely different from how they usually do. They're not clunky. They're thin, they're agile, he runs, he jumps, he kicks things in the face, does flips, and fucking tears shit apart. He's scary as shit, too. And then there's something else I wanted to bring up, and I just wanted to clear this up early on, before, you haven't brought it up yet, so I figured you didn't think much of it, but the religious symbolism in the show. A lot has been made about it over the years. People have said so much shit about the religious symbolism, and Hideaki Anno completely is it has no meaning whatsoever. He's I did not think about that at all. And I'm inclined to believe him, and the reason why is that the religious symbolism in Eva mostly seems to be paying homage to the sort of cult here, but more iconic in Japan, manga Devilman, which is by Go Nagai. And Go Nagai is the manga artist who kind of fathered a lot of modern anime and genres. He was the first person to take a giant robot and put the pilot inside of it in the series Mazinger. He started that. and he was known for having these, like, his main characters were always really demonic and devilish looking, and his series Devilman was literally about, like, Devilman was a half demon who, like, fights Satan and God and shit, and it's all, the whole thing of Devilman is all religious symbolism, but for no reason other than that it's cool. You know, like, there's no, like, deeper resonant meaning behind any of it. Like, you can tell maybe Gonagai read the Bible once, but he probably was just appropriating religious symbolism for no reason. And in Evangelion, I don't get the sense that he was trying to make any kind of religious statement. It was just cool stuff. And the fact that when Evangelion, when Eva Unit 01 is walking towards the camera after he kills the bad guy, the angel, and he's, like, colored completely black and you just see one eye shining, is exactly what Devilman looks like. So I'm pretty sure it's, like, direct callbacks to that series, which is not surprising. Lots of anime call back to Devilman, because it's fucking cool. It's just a cool-looking manga. And, so yeah, I really don't think there's anything to the religious symbolism. Just thought I'd get that out of the way before we get too deep into the show.
Right.
Yeah.
And, like, I had been told about it, like, or I had basically been told that from the start, so I never really paid much attention to it the first way through. I didn't really think there was much to it until the last 2 episodes of it, of the show, and in which case I was like, there could be some meaning to that the whole time, I guess, because
it strikes me as, like,
I'm sure we'll cover that when we get there.
The ending strikes me as more psychological and maybe spiritual, but never really dealing with Christianity. Like, the Human Instrumentality Project does not feel like a Christian thing to me at all, so, like, it has nothing to do with the dogma of that religion, despite all the symbolism being Christian.
That's true. I mean more the end of Evangelion, the movies. It kind of phrases the whole thing as kind of like a re-origin story, in a way, and that's the only, like, really parallel that I ever, like, explicitly drew to a religion. So that's all I meant by that.
Yeah, we can definitely cover it when we get there if we think it's important. What did you think of the weird council dudes at the start of the episode?
Okay, I specifically wrote this down because I was like, they have a bunch of weird Western action cliches. They have, like, a mysterious snide council. They have media covering up the information. This, like, mysterious organization that apparently has to save the world with these cool giant robots. And then you get this weird feeling because you're comparing it to the like, intimate view of the employees that we have. Like, we see how Katsuragi lives. We see how Ritsuko acts as her friend. Like, so you get, like, a really wholesome experience out of it that kind of just, like, clashes with it, but not in a bad way, because that's what Eva's trying to, like, set up.
It's definitely, Joe, just super weird to see those guys in this show. Like, because so much of the show is about characterization and, like, you know, these really real-feeling characters, and then you see these, like, cartoon bad guys that are color-coded. Like, there's, like, they all have their own light on them that shines one color, and they all look totally weird. The one guy's got a visor, the other dude's got, like, this giant hook nose, and I noticed, that the camera angles they use in there's one shot where, like, it's a shot of a dude, and you see him through another dude's arm.
Through Akari's arm,
and it was like,
I remember that.
I just sat there like, they're trying to make this look as weird as possible. Like, they're trying to make this feel as distant and out there as they can. That, like, the people look weird, the colors are weird, the camera angles are weird, everything's weird. And it really draws attention to it, like, this should not be here. This is not normal. And I don't know what to think about it yet, because it definitely stood out. Like, if they were trying to make it stand out, they succeeded, but I don't know what it was about, really.
Yeah.
I barely remember those guys, anyway. I know they're the ones who are behind everything, but yeah.
And it's weird, because later on in the anime, they removed the council sitting there. It's literally, instead of the council sitting there, the people, they replace it with these giant black squares that are just audio talking to them. I was always like, why do they do that?
I guess it's just to abstract it even more. Like, I feel like they're just meant to be super abstract. Definitely something we'll talk about when we get to those episodes, because I'm interested. Like, because they're so innocuous, I feel like a lot of people don't pay them any mind, because they're not interesting characters. So I feel like I kind of have to overthink them now to try and figure out what the fuck is up with them. I took a lot of notes for this episode, holy shit. I wanted to talk about some of the basic structure stuff that we didn't cover in episode 1, like the opening song, ending song, because I think it's interesting. The opening song, Zankoku na... what is it? Cruel Angel Thesis. It's a classic, absolute classic. Like, this is literally the most iconic anime song ever. Like... You can debate whether or not Neon Genesis is the most iconic anime, but there's no question that Cruel Angel Thesis is the best known, best remembered song in anime history. And it's very interesting to me because it feels at once so 90s, but at the same time, timeless. You know, like, you can listen to it today and it's still cool, but it's definitely got a 90s vibe to it. And worth noting, the girl who did that song has done she did the ending theme to Shakugan no Shana, which is another great song, and it's kind of like, because the Eva opening is like this burning spirit young man kind of song, and the Shana ending is the female version of it, like the burning spirit young female version of the song. It's fun to compare them, but that's totally irrelevant, but I felt like bringing it up. The ending song is Fly Me to the Moon by... It's originally a Frank Sinatra song, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, every single time it's different in the ending. Yeah. Which is interesting. I don't really know why, but it's different every time. It's an interesting choice.
I don't know. Maybe there's some parallels there between like the tone of the episode and the way they change it or something like that.
Yeah, that could definitely be true. I think it's even sometimes different voice actresses who sing it as well, maybe. I'm not entirely sure. I think it might be Rei Ayanami's voice actress who sings it most of the time, though.
I definitely think it changes at least once or twice. And I know they changed the entire color palette of like the outro once or twice just from watching it recently. Because me and my friend pointed it out, like, is this changing every time? We didn't even realize it was changing until... I don't know, 3/4 of the way through.
It's just such an odd song to be in Eva, and I think a lot of people forget that it is, in fact, in Evangelion, you know, that it's Fly Me to the Fucking Moon by Frank Sinatra, sang in English by Japanese voice actresses, by the way, which also kind of cracks me up. And especially because they did this, by the way, have you ever played the game Bayonetta?
I know plenty about it. I've never played it myself because I never had the console.
Bayonetta also has Fly Me to the Moon in a similar fashion. Like, I feel like they got the idea from Eva, but like whenever you get into fights, it's Fly Me to the Moon. It's the battle music. But
really?
It's like yeah, no joke. Awesome. It's like this Japanese, or I think it's Japanese girl singing in English again, but it's like a more active, battle-y sort of Fly Me to the Moon. But yeah, I guess it's a really popular song in Japan. There's always a number of like weird tracks that you'll see appear in anime, and Evangelion also has more songs that are in English that don't sound like anime music in the movie, especially Come Sweet Death, which if we do the movie, we're definitely talking about the song because I love it. One of my favorite songs, actually, which is a 7 or 8 minute like canon in D, like restructuring song. Anyway, that's not for now. I just wanted to bring up the opening and ending songs. And also the next episode previews, because they were kind of famous for the fact that every time Misato promises that there's going to be lots of fan service in the next episode, like she always says it at the end. She says, Sabisu, Sabisu! Like, there's going to be lots of service.
Oh, okay. Really? Well, yeah. I actually never really watched the, like, next episode previews when we were going through it because obviously we have the next episode right there.
Right, yeah.
If we want to watch it, we can just go.
I mean, they're nothing special, but that line is like if you're ever in some kind of Evangelion clique or something and someone mentions I promise there'll be service, you know why now.
Oh, okay. Good. Context is good. I'm glad because there's a lot of the stuff you're talking about references to the past and stuff like that. I was always under the impression that Eva was the anime that animes referenced, so it's so weird to like sit here and hear
Right, that it references
Eva
stuff.
references plenty of other stuff. It's like, how far does the rabbit hole go?
Oh, I have a whole podcast on this very channel, which, by the way, will be the Digibrody After Dark channels, where this will be posted. There's a podcast that me and my cousin did called, like, on influences in media, and the whole thing was because people kept saying that Pacific Rim was ripping off Evangelion. And so I spend the whole podcast just like breaking down everything that Evangelion like references and like all the lineage that it comes from, because it comes from like a really rich mecha history. And a lot of people don't get that because, like you said, they think, you know, it goes, that is the origin point. But Gainax as a studio are known for paying homage to things. Like that's kind of where they got their start. If you watch the first ever Gainax short, it's called Daikon 4, or Daikon 3 and Daikon 4, and both of them are like these 4-minute like music video parody animations where it's just references to all kinds of anime and Western movies and stuff. Like there's Star Wars references, Macross, just all these Gundam anime crap, all mishmashed into one giant compilation. And there's a scene in Daikon 4, like the way that it ends is like the visuals of that scene are directly done in End of Evangelion. Like when you see the scene where all the crosses spread across the earth in End of Eva, it's exactly the same as in Daikon, all the earth has cherry blossoms bloom across it. And you get this, like, it's the same. It's the exact same, you know, and yeah, so it's interesting to note. And Gainax have always been that way. And they had the same director, Hideaki Anno, was like the chief director of the studio for all the way up through his and her circumstances when he left working on that show. So Eva definitely calls back to a lot of stuff, and not all of that context is important to understanding the show, but it's definitely important to understanding the lineage of the show if you ever wanted to get into what does Eva reference and what references Eva, because there's so many people who think that everything's ripping off Evangelion, when oftentimes they're really ripping off the same thing Eva's ripping off, which is some older, you know, more obscure thing. But yeah.
Yeah. One thing I really wanted to talk about again is seeing this again so recently, I'm picking up on a ton of the foreshadowing that they've been doing,
right,
that I just never really noticed the first time through. And specifically, there's this line that Ritsuko says to Katsuragi about how his cranial nerves, Shinji's cranial nerves, might have been damaged. Right. And Katsuragi goes like, "Don't you mean his heart?" And I kind of like sat there and was like, I think that's a pretty like ample explanation of what Katsuragi and Ritsuko's relationship is like. You know, the brain versus heart dichotomy that they get going basically up until the breakdowns near the end.
The big thing I caught, like what most of my notes pertain to actually, is that Misato is the most mature and the most empathetic character in this show. That's what sets her apart, is that all the other adults don't really seem to empathize with Shinji, or if they do, they're doing it in like an ass-backwards kind of way. Like, they expect him to grow up on his own. They're hands-off about it. And Misato's the only one who looks at him and goes, this kid is not, he's not ready. Like, he's not grown up. You know, she gets that. She looks at him and she sees a child, and everyone else seems to see just this guy who doesn't, you know, pull his weight or whatever. She's the one Shinji's like, oh, I can live alone, and Misato's the one who stands up like an adult and says, no, you're a child, you're coming to live with me, you know. And she welcomes him home at one point. I love when he steps into her house, the lines that they say, he says tadaima, which means like I'm home. And yeah, that's just like common. Like when you come home in Japan, you always say that. Like you walk through the door and you say that. So there's a sort of weight to saying it. Like, you know, oh, I am home. And you'll notice they do like some really quick cuts there to show each of their faces, like, you know, to emphasize that. And yeah, it's like she's the first one to open up to him to make him feel welcome. And he says he's laying in the bath and he's like, you know, Misato is a good person. Like, it's the first person he recognizes as, oh, this person is good. And yeah, you kind of feel that way. Like, she's great. She's really great. Like, watching this show as an adult, immediately my favorite character is her, just because she's just so good at the way she handles Shinji. My favorite line in the episode at the very end, she stops and she says, "By the way, you did a very good thing today. I want you to understand that." Like, and I fucking loved that, because those words can mean a lot to people. Like,
Yeah.
I know how much that compliments work. And I'm very... I wouldn't say I'm stingy with compliments, but I know where to place them. Like, I want people to feel confident. I want people to know that they're doing something right. That's why, like, when we were doing earlier, you were like, "Oh, I guess I'm a writer." And I was like, "No, you're a writer." Because I know it's important to reinforce those kind of things to let you know, "No, I think you do well at that. You don't need to wallow in misery and wonder if you did a good thing. I'm going to tell you you did a good thing," you know? That line is so good to me, and it just really makes me feel for her. And the best part is that she doesn't even completely realize that she's so good, because she sits in the bath and she says the line, "I'm as shameless as Ritsuko." Like, she sees herself as having used Shinji, and she's kind of trying to pay it back now, you know? And it's just so good. Such a well-written character, like...
And actually, with that pointing out, it kind of made me, you pointing out that kind of made me remember, so 2 weeks ago, or maybe 3 weeks ago, I had this, like, semi-existential crisis, and this is going to be, like, a tangential story to explain my point, but...
That's fine.
Because, all through college I've been a computer science major, and that really never made very much sense to me, because I come home, like, every day, I sit and I write stuff, and I go through the toils of writing stuff, and it's hard, and sometimes I don't want to do it, and it feels like actual work, but it's something that I love doing. Right. So I've always felt like way more of a writer than anything even related to computer science.
Yeah.
And so I had this, like, this sort of crisis, and I went to my current English professor, and I was talking to him, like, you know, maybe I should change my major, and, like, but I don't really know, like, I don't know other writers like me, I don't know how good my writing is, and he basically just, like, he closed his laptop, and he, like, looked over at me, and he's like, "Look, I've seen your essays, if you want to be a writer, all you need is a work ethic." And I told him, well, you know, I write already every day. And he's like, "Well, you're already a writer. Why aren't you an English major? Go change." Or not an English major, but whatever. Just change to writing already. Because you're not doing any programming, etc. And I kind of just walked out of there, like, smiling to myself, like, huh. I guess that's all I really needed. But yeah, that's kind of where I've been lately. So it's cool that you pointed that out, because in a weird way, that kind of stuff still affects me. Right. I think nobody really ever stops growing, so...
Oh, definitely. I mean, I feel the same when people tell me, you know, back when I was in school, I had similar experiences where my professors would be like, you know, the only thing I really learned in college was in the one English class I took, like the beginner's English class. I had a great professor in that, even though it was a community college. And on the first essay I turned in, he said, "This essay is horrible, but the funny thing is I think you're going to be a great writer." And what he meant by that is because my essay was completely stream of consciousness, and at the time I was, like, really untempered with my writing. I just kind of wrote, and I had developed a really strong voice, but I was not, like, I had no real ability to, like, go back and edit shit, you know? And so what he kept telling me, he kept sending me back the essay and telling me to simplify it. Just simplify, simplify, simplify. And ever since then, I've been obsessed with simplification in my writing, where I cut, like, all extraneous sentences and stuff like that, and try to make everything, like, really tight and focused, to the point that now I just do it naturally. So, yeah, right. Definitely people can just say things, and it really can have a huge impact, and, you know, I understand that as well.
They capture that feel so well, because it's not like Shinji turns around and is like, "You know, I really needed that. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Katsuragi." He's like, he almost doesn't react at all.
Right.
And I think that's good that they made that choice, because really stuff like that is the stuff you look back on and realize
definitely
that was meaningful to me. I that was something I needed. So,
couple more small notes I have. Shinji's the difference between Shinji and Misato in terms of sexuality is something that I never really appreciated until now, because my girlfriend is like Misato in that she constantly is like a tease. She brings up sex a lot because to her that's just normal. You know, like she doesn't really have any reservations or embarrassment about it. And Shinji completely has nothing but reservation and embarrassment about it, you know? And it's sort of represented at this early stage of just like Shinji's a child, she's an adult, but I feel like there's more to it than that, where, you know, because we definitely see a difference between like her and Ritsuko, where Ritsuko is not openly sexual and kind of chastises, you know, her for being that way. And I feel like there's something, I don't quite remember exactly what happens throughout the show, but I feel like there's definitely something to this. Like there's a reason that she's so sexually open. And Shinji, it's funny because he just kind of passes it off as, well, she's just her, you know, he doesn't really get upset about it. He's just kind of embarrassed. Yeah. But my favorite moment is she gets up on the table and she says, "Isn't this nice?" And he looks right at her boobs, and then she says, like, "Being together like this," and he's like, oh yeah. Like, he totally thought she was implying that, like, her boobs in his face were nice. And then the only other random note I have is that this show has a lot of mechanical porn. Just awesome, like, there's a scene where they're standing around and it's like this giant clip is loading, like these huge fucking bullets are being loaded up this conveyor belt, and there's like giant guns being shipped everywhere, and everything has like labels on it, like detailed words and everything of like the manufacturer and stuff like that, you know. I feel like if you're a military nut or you're like a giant robot nut in that way, you're gonna go crazy for the show. And as I remember, there is a military nut character who shows up in like the next episode, so yeah, it's doing it on purpose. You know, they're definitely like, the people making this show have like a mechanics fetish or a military fetish, and that's why there's so much of that in the show. That's all my notes. If you have anything else to say,
I think the only things that I have are we never really mentioned Dad and or Shinji's dad and Ritsuko's talk about Rei.
Yeah.
I thought it was really cool because they were standing in the room, the shattered room of the failed experiment with Unit 00.
Which we don't even know about yet.
Exactly. It's more foreshadowing that I didn't even pick up on the first time, which is weird.
Definitely a lot of stuff in the show that pays rewatching, you know?
Yeah.
Which is probably why so many people say that they don't get it until they rewatch it, because it's definitely a show that expects you to be taking notes, and it's almost like it's disappointed when you don't, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and then you kind of have a, oh shit, because I think most people watch stuff so passively that we only go back to watch stuff really actively once we know we're supposed to. You know, like, once we've gone, oh shit, I should have been paying attention, let me go back and watch it again, you know? I think that's why people get so shocked a lot of the times with my My Little Pony analysis, like, just because I'm watching it actively, and it's not that hard a lot of the times to pick up a lot of the stuff that I talk about, but people will be like, I didn't understand any of that when I watched it, I just thought it was cute and funny, you know? And it's just like there's such a huge difference between paying attention and just kind of watching, not knowing what's going on.
Yeah. Alrighty, I think that's that then.